Again, as with Easter, we will begin with a question catered for each of you, beginning with Ms. Dollarhite. You were the chair of the Citizens Task Force last year. Do you think this was a productive committee? And if elected, would you like to see similar task forces in the future?
I do think it was a productive committee. We worked very hard for 9 months looking for ways to deal with a very crowded judicial building, overcrowding with the sheriff's department, overcrowding among various offices. And we came up with 2 plans. I think they were very cost effective, and I would like to see a seated task force, maybe for a couple of different areas and a couple of different sets of task forces. We have a wealth of knowledge in our county if we only tapped into it, and I believe it was extremely productive. We worked hard, we looked at the budgets, we looked at all of the county offices, we toured each building, we also saw some inefficiencies. And you hate to point out, I wouldn't want anybody poking through my closet, but that isn't our closet, it's our county buildings that you all pay taxes for. There's always room for improvement, and I do think that we could tap into those citizens of the county and have some task forces looking at various areas of our county.
Mr. Snowden, in our voter's guide, you said you would have a, quote, even broader range of opportunities for community improvement. Name some of those opportunities.
Well, I think, generally, as a commissioner, there's a wide range of things that you have an opportunity to do. Ideally, one of the things that I've been looking at as far as a topic of importance for me is our sheriff's department. So as a commissioner, I would have an opportunity to help our sheriff's department, help our community, help our county, see that they feel safe. I think you do, as a commissioner, you do have influence over the road department. So even though we do have a road administrator, I think that you can work with the road administrator as well to help better our road department.
Thank you. Mr. Bilyeu, in our voter's guide, you cited extensive pastoral experience. How does that translate into county government?
Thank you for the question. The primary way is an organizational understanding. In starting a mission or being a part of a mission in its early days when there were 20 in attendance and 37 members, seeing that grow by over 12,000% until there were 4,677 members. To put that in perspective, that is approximately the approximate population of Billings and Clever and Spokane and Highlandville all summed together. To work with multi-million-dollar budgets and to oversee up to 88 employees, those are the things that give skills in how to work with an organization, especially when that organization is going through change. Christian County, as are all counties, as are all things that are alive, is going through change. And so being able to go through that change and to lead through that change, and quite frankly, to keep people on board through that change are where my skills would lie.
Thank you. Mr. Snowden, in the past, the Commission has discussed instituting a domestic utility tax as a way to alleviate financial hardship. If elected, is this something you would pursue?
Domestic utility tax?
Yes, sir.
More than likely, probably not. If it would raise taxes, I'm not going to be for that.
Mr. Bilyeu?
I think taxation, when taxation happens, I think it ought to be voted on. Therefore, whatever kind of tax it was, if it is a tax that can be voted on, then let the people decide. If it's a tax that cannot be voted on, then I would not be in favor of that tax.
Mrs. Dollarhite?
Believe it or not, that's what prompted the Citizens Task Force to be formed. Little did we know that tax had already been voted in several years ago, and once the current judicial building was paid off, that tax kicked in. So whether or not we agreed or didn't agree, it's been implemented. Look at your bill. It's being collected, and it generates quite a bit of revenue for the county. I was against that tax. That hurts the people that are on the most fixed income, the elderly people that are living on Social Security, single moms. A domestic utility tax is one of those things you can only turn your thermostat up or down so much. You can only cut back on how much propane that you use. you have to have a phone. And all of those things are things that I don't believe was the best tax for our county citizens, and I was against that tax. And I agree, there should never be a tax increase without the vote of the people. That one was voted in, I sure don't remember it when I went to vote, and I've not missed an election.
The second question is from the audience, beginning with Mr. Bilyeu. Should we keep the current county buildings or sell them to find a central location to work from?
That sounds very much like an either-or question, and I would suspect that it's not an either-or, but a both-and. In other words, I would expect that we would be keeping a number of our county buildings, and that there will probably be a need for some either purchasing or building. I do not think it will be either-or at that place, in that situation. I would further say that I think it is important not only to get the input from the citizens on these kind of questions, but I also think that it's important to be able to draw in experts from other fields to look at different things. Some of the things that were proposed were very broad, and quite frankly, there were not dollars assigned to those. There have been those that said, for example, that some of what was proposed by that task force would have cost $12 million or more to implement. Whether that's true or not, I do not know. But study has to be done by competent people.
Mrs. Dollarhite?
I would agree. I don't think that it's an either-or answer. What we currently have, we need to be good stewards of. And that was problematic when we toured the historic courthouse. There were boxes piled to the ceiling in many of those rooms that could have been cleaned out and could have been utilized. So before we go looking for other buildings, we need to be good stewards of what we currently have. Whether that's cleaning it out, whether it is a little paint and upgrade, but granted, as the county grows, we're going to have a need for more space and for more services. And by putting a citizens task force out there, we have some very competent realtors and investment people that could aid us free of charge. Unlike a financial planner, those people live here. They pay the taxes here. They have a vested interest too in our community to look and see what we have available. So I would say it is a combination of the two.
Mr. Snowden?
Ideally, I wouldn't say that it was an either-or question. I do agree that if you're going to look at real estate as property to sell, and then reinvest the money in a way to better our county, I think you definitely need to get people involved who are experts. I think that will just make you money. A smart person gets people to help you, to advise you, in the best way to attack a problem or the best place to build a building or a location. So I think it's just smart that you would do that. But I'm sure they probably have some that they're going to get rid of and some that they're going to keep. We don't really know which ones those are.
The next question is another one from the audience. And it is, how many commission meetings did you attend before you decided to run for Western Associate Commissioner? And we'll begin with Mrs. Dollarhite.
I could probably count how many I didn't attend more than I could how many I have. I've been attending faithfully for the last 6 years. I've missed very few. I've been watching, because of what happened to my husband and I being attacked by the federal government, by USDA, I recognize very quickly your government can make or break you. So that is why I started attending. That's why I started looking and listening, because it's extremely important who our elected officials are. And they can be very helpful or they can be very harmful. So I've missed very few, very few.
Mr. Snowden?
The question was, how many meetings have I attended before I decided to run for Western Commission?
Yes, sir.
None.
Mr. Bilyeu?
Mine was none also. My desire came from other sources other than attending meetings.
Okay, next question. Last August, the current commission imposed a 7-cent levy for general revenue and a 20-cent levy for Eastern Road District. At the time, many county residents thought the meeting was deceitful because the 2 tax levy hearing notices published in the legal section of the Headliner News said the proposed levy was 0. No residents attended the hearing, citing that had the notice in the paper had hinted that the commission was going to discuss it in further detail, they would have attended. What are your thoughts on this, and would you have acted differently, beginning with Mr. Snowden?
Well, I like probably both of us and most of the other Eastern Commissioners think that if there's gonna be a tax raise, there needs to be a vote of the people. I don't understand why there weren't any people at the meeting. Do I agree with the tax? Is that what the questions you asked? What was the question exactly?
What are your thoughts on them imposing the tax and that it was, people may believe that it was deceitful?
What are your thoughts on how they went about imposing the tax? They proposed it at 0 in the public hearing, or in the public notice section of the Headliner News, but then they imposed a tax, so community members didn't attend. So what are your thoughts on how they went about it? Not on the tax itself. We will have a follow-up question though.
I think that if it occurred that way, would be a little bit deceitful in the way that came about. If the people didn't realize it, I think that's wrong.
Mr. Bilyeu?
Well, one thing, point of clarification from my understanding, is that this tax was already in place. It simply had voluntarily not been collected by the commission over the years that they could have been collecting it. I think that is a little different than simply saying they instituted a tax without the vote. My understanding, and it could be incorrect of course, is that was already in place. Having said that, let me be very clear. I don't think that that's the best way to handle information. Government runs on trust. Marriage runs on trust. In a lot of ways, life runs on trust. And trust is built up with good decisions over time, and it can be lost with one decision at one point in time. And I fear that's what happened with some people at that time.
Mrs. Dollarhite?
It was advertised as a zero tax levy discussion 3 times in the paper. It was listed on the agenda as a zero tax levy discussion. Yes, the county commissioners had the ability to raise that without the vote of the people. Because you have the ability does not mean that you have the morals that you should be doing that. I would always advocate for a vote of the people with any kind of tax levy increase. The way it was advertised as zero, that's why the room was empty. It's my understanding there was only one person there, and that was Jack from the news leader in Springfield. It was a shock to the people that tax was implemented. Now, having said that, it will be difficult to repeal that tax because the money has already been spent. So moving forward, it's going to be difficult for any of us or any of the Eastern Commissioner candidates to deal with that because the money's already been spent. However, with economic development, hopefully we can bring in enough revenue. And my time's up.
Next question. Staying on topic with the levies, they were approved with a 2-to-1 vote. Current Western Associate Commissioner Bill Barnett voted against the levies, and no levy was imposed on the Western District. Do you agree with this decision? Beginning with Mr. Bilyeu.
My understanding is that the tax that was levied on Eastern is being used for Eastern. If that is true, that's a different kind of thing. If the tax was levied only on Eastern, but it's being used countywide, I think that's incorrect and should not happen. If that tax was levied only on the Eastern, and it's being used only for the Eastern, I do not think it's inappropriate, other than what was already said on the previous question about, I think the way it was done was inappropriate. But that's a big issue for me, is that tax money that is being, the people who are being taxed in the Eastern side, is that money going back across to the Western? My understanding is that it's not, and if it's not, then it's a different situation.
Mrs. Dollarhite?
Could you repeat it, please?
Yes. Stay on topic with the levies. They were approved with a 2-to-1 vote. Current Western Associate Commissioner Bill Barnett voted against the levies, and no levy was imposed on the Western District. Do you agree with this decision?
Well, a county commissioner is there to represent the will of the people. And I believe the people on the western side did not want a tax levy increase. And therefore, Bill voted the conscience of the people that he represented. So I support that. On the eastern side, I believe those people probably did not want a tax levy increase as well. However, it is a collection, it is a piece of the whole entire budget pie. So it is not strictly just the eastern side. And that becomes problematic. And then you have an equilibrium of one side supporting the other side. Now, we are a collective county, and I know that there is equipment and there's funds that cross both sides. If we've got an issue and we've got equipment on this side that the eastern side needs, we share, and that's the way it should be. But with taxes and funding like this, that gets really sticky, and I don't agree. I agree with what Bill did. I don't agree with what the eastern side tax.
Mr. Snowden?
Since it was set up that you could raise the taxes on the eastern side or the western side, then I would agree that Bill go along with the way his constituents felt about that, and that was that they did not want that tax. And so I do agree with that.
Okay, this next question is another from the audience. Do you have any idea at all that may assist in clearing up the confusion between the auditor and commissioners? Beginning with Mrs. Dollarhite.
This would be the one time that I would advocate for a closed session meeting with those individual office holders. It's kind of like lancing the boil. You've got to get to the core, you've got to figure out what the issues are, and you need to sit down and talk like adults. In addition to those office holders, there's other office holders that handle the paperwork. And I think if there was a county meeting amongst all the office holders that deal with the budget, that deal with paying of the bills, sit down, discuss, come up with a consensus of what is reasonable. How long is it reasonable to hold paperwork? Who is responsible, and set a schedule for each office? Because I'm sure what is required to be turned in the sheriff's department is vastly different from what's turned in the assessor's department. They probably...
I think you ideally would just, you try to set them down and try to rectify the situation by just talking, and hopefully figure out where this problem started and how it got to be like this.
Mr. Bilyeu?
I have spent some time thinking about this, and I think that there are solutions that are being offered that probably simply go beyond the authority of the commission when it relates to other elected officials. My thinking at this point is that if I am elected on August the 2nd, the next few months will be spent in information gathering, research, if you will. I have a friend that is a presiding commissioner in nearby county. I want to call him and others. I have a friend who was presiding commissioner in Greene County. I want to say, how do you deal with situations like this when people just simply are not connecting well? The other thing that I think, and probably would be high on my list of potential solutions, is to find someone totally unbiased outside of the organization who is very knowledgeable in the affairs as it relates to the auditor, to the commission, and to the other county officials. Let those folks help us discover how to fix the problem.
Okay, the next question is from the audience. The Republican platform calls for making government smaller. What specific steps would you take to make government in Christian County smaller? Beginning with Mr. Snowden.
I don't know that I have any specific steps. Generally, I always feel that there's waste. I always feel that there's waste in every department. I think if I had the opportunity to sit every department head down in a room and say, okay, here's what I want you to do. I want you to submit me your budget, and I will pass it. And I want you to run your department at the very best it can possibly be run. And at the end of the year, I will let you keep 50% of how much you save. I think you would probably be surprised how much money you would save. So I think ideally making government smaller in a county level is very difficult to do unless you can find where there's money or places of people being used that we don't need.
Mr. Bilyeu?
My goal would not be smaller. My goal would be more effective. And I think the way you do that is the same way you eat an elephant. You do it one bite at a time. You do it a little bit here and a little bit there. Truthfully, we'd like to save hundreds and thousands and perhaps millions of dollars, but that's not the way it happens. It happens with looking for inefficiencies, eliminating those inefficiencies, and then looking for ways to do it better. And by the way, the people closest to the action are the ones that know how to save the money. It's not those who are sitting away from the table, it's those who are at the table. So I'd be listening to those and encouraging those and celebrating. We gotta celebrate when people are doing a good job at keeping government very responsive to the people and very efficient.
Mrs. Dollarhite?
I don't know that you can make it bigger or smaller with one person being elected. I do think you can become more efficient, more cost-effective, a better communicator. But it always comes down to money and people. And people represent money. And we've got to keep good people in our county. We've got to keep our deputies. We've got to keep our road crew. Because when they can go anywhere else and use the little experience that they've gleaned here and go and make $5 and $10 more an hour, we've got a problem. So we need to work as much as we possibly can to increase our tax base so that we can take care of our people. I would also like to see us cross-train some people within the courthouse so that during assessment season or during the tax season, we've got folks that can float, that we don't have to hire outside people to come and help. And if somebody's sick, that someone else has already been cross-trained within that office, they can step in and take over. So efficiency is a must, and I'm out of time.
Okay, next question. In your own words, give a brief definition of the Sunshine Law, beginning with Mr. Bilyeu.
I think the Sunshine Law is a good law. It's designed to make sure that we see what's going on. The whole idea of sunshine is that if you've ever looked at dust in your room, when the sun shines through the window, you see the dust. And so it's a protection for the people, and I think it's a very good protection. I do know that there will be times that it probably is mandated. But I like the reality that even though it may be legal to close a meeting, it may not be necessary to close a meeting. My goal would be every meeting that can be, by law, open, be open. And that there not be anything hidden from the good people we represent.
Mrs. Dollarhite?
In short, the Sunshine Law is there to protect the public from the public entity. You are supposed to post any public meetings at a minimum of 24 hours prior to. And it's also stated that within elected officials, if two or more are talking about an issue where they're making decisions, that's against the Sunshine Law if it is not in an open, advertised public meeting. And I can understand in a way where it can be problematic, because if you're sitting around in the commission chambers and you're discussing an issue, you may be discussing it perfectly in good faith, and you may not be making any decisions. You're just chewing the fat about what we're going to do. What do you think's a good idea? What do you think about this presentation? But you have to be careful as an elected official that you're not doing that, because that is against the Sunshine Law, where two or more are gathered. So it is a protection for the public good, and I think it's important for our agendas to be extremely explicit and to be posted as far in advance as they can be.
Mr. Snowden?
Well, ideally, the Sunshine Law is simply about transparency. It keeps any backroom deals from happening. That's pretty much the simple answer to it.
Okay, the next question is from the audience. Are you or your family now or have ever been part of the Sovereign Citizens Group, beginning with Mrs. Dollarhite?
Absolutely not. A lot of people have some very skewed ideas about what sovereign citizens are, and we're seeing that in these police shootings over and over and over. A true sovereign citizen has denounced their citizenship. They do not have a birth certificate, they do not have a social security number, they live under the radar. They don't have a driver's license, they don't own property. They rent, they work for cash. Believe me, I pay my taxes, and I've got plenty of vehicles. I've got a CCW, I have a driver's license, I have a business license. So no, I have not ever, nor would I ever be part of the sovereign citizens movement. However, we are sovereign under our Lord and Savior. And sometimes we forget that when we're acting within other elected officials. Sovereign within the Lord, but not a sovereign citizen in the definition of a true sovereign citizen.
Mr. Snowden?
No, I have not.
Mr. Blue?
No.
Next question. This is also from the audience. Are you opposed to having Christian County public meetings in the evening so more people can attend, beginning with Mr. Snowden?
I wouldn't have any problem with that at all. I think anytime that you can envelop more of the county, they have great ideas. And, sometimes, you're sitting there faced with a solution, and someone comes to your meeting that has a great idea. I think you should be willing to open them up and make it to where as many people as possible can attend. Although I think if it becomes a gripe session and nothing gets done and people just want to fuss and carry on, then I think that's, that doesn't really benefit anyone. So, but no, I think that'd be fine.
Mr. Blue?
One of the things that it's good for us to remember is that a decision, when it's made, has a domino effect. People are affected by that decision. So, if the meeting is held in the evening, there are a number of questions that have to be addressed. For example, security of the building in the evening when no one else is there. Secondly, the people that have to be there, mandated to be there, that normally are working from 8 to 5, they're going to then have their schedule adjusted. Now, is there a problem with that? Not really. But if somebody calls in and they say, well, they're not here because they have a meeting tonight, sometimes that creates an issue for them. Now, let me say, I am not opposed to the evening meetings, but it has to be, by, I think, statute, it has to be on topic. So somebody cannot just come to that and gripe at will about anything that's on their mind or heart. If we do it, I think it only ought to be done as an experiment, because people might not come at night either.
Mrs. Dollarhite?
I would advocate for evening meetings, and yes, you do have to keep those strictly to a topic, or one or two topics, whatever's advertised in accordance with the agenda. I also would advocate some town hall meetings. Those are very different. And Lynn Morris has been very good about holding town hall meetings. When we conducted the task force, we held 4 town hall meetings, and I can tell you it was very, very disappointing the amount of interest in people that showed up to those meetings. But I think it's important that you put it out there and that you give people the option to attend those meetings. I probably don't see a ton of people coming unless it was a tax issue, but if there was an issue in regard to Riverside Bridge that came up, I would imagine that building would be full wherever it was held. That's important to the community. It affects all of the community. It would affect all of the county, regardless of which side it was being discussed. And so, yes, I would advocate for evening meetings, but they would need to stay on topic. Thank you.
Okay, next question. What is the recommended percentage of reserve the county should have on hand in case of emergencies? And what would you consider to be an emergency that would cause you to pull from the reserve fund, beginning with Mr. Blue?
I do not know the answer to your question on the recommended percentage. I don't know that. The second part of the question was, what would I recommend, or what would I call an emergency?
Yes, what would you consider an emergency?
I would consider as an emergency things such as tornadoes, floods, fire that would destroy one of the buildings that is necessary for governmental business. Those kinds of major issues. I certainly would not anticipate using reserves for what might be called the day-to-day necessities. Even if they are urgent, they may not be important.
Mrs. Dollarhite?
I don't think there's a hard and fast answer, because for various accounts, there are various accounts that have to be held in reserve. For example, if you've got a bond out there, you have to have so much in reserve to cover that bond and to cover that payment. And I believe that's 30%. It varies on which entity and which account you're talking about. But for emergencies, it's just like at home. You better have a cushion. You better have a rainy day fund, because we've had tons of flooding. We live in Tornado Alley. Things happen. We always need a reserve, and it would probably be a good idea if we had $5 million in reserve if we could. Our budget runs roughly $27.5 million. If you look at the big picture, that's really not a lot of money to hold in reserve, but there's never enough money to go around. There never is, whether it's a county government or your home budget.
Mr. Snowden?
Ideally, I don't know what the percentage would be. I think it's generally, they try to hold somewhere around $3 million in reserves. You know, anytime we have a natural disaster, you know, whether it be a tornado, flooding, it takes a while for money to come in. And generally, you know, especially with the road departments, I know currently I work with the road department, and I know last summer and last fall and winter, we went out a lot and we had to refix roads after we, you know, just got done redoing them the week before, you know, and still in some areas we were still working on roads from a year ago. So we have to have money in reserve to take care of that until FEMA funds come in. But, so, you know, anytime there's an emergency, I think we should be able to reserve.
Okay, the next question is from the audience. What have you done for the Republican Party in Christian County, beginning with Mrs. Dollarhite?
I've been attending the Republican Central Committees for about the last 5 or 6 years. My husband is on that committee. I've made several pies. I've gone to the Lincoln Days, the Chili Supper. I've helped set up, I've helped tear down. I've been pretty active in the Republican Party. I've always voted Republican. I don't think I've ever, I'm trying to think if I've ever not voted Republican. But that is something that I take seriously. The question was asked of the Eastern if that was important about your party affiliation. I believe it is important. I think the party platform best represents my values. I think it best represents our community as a whole. And so I've worked hard for other candidates. I've knocked doors for people. I've thrown candy in parades. I've helped with various aspects of other candidates that I believed in. So I have worked for the Republican Party.
Mr. Snowden?
I don't know that I've really ever worked for the Republican Party. I really don't know that I have done anything specific for the Republican Party. I've raised my family that way. This will probably be the closest to preaching I've ever done. The Bible speaks about raising up your children the way they should go and they won't depart from it. So I've raised mine up to be Republicans. I've given money for Right to Life. I mean, I've always been a Republican. I've always voted Republican. I don't even know how you don't. I don't even know how I can't even fathom how you even look at the other side. I just don't.
Mr. Bilyeu?
If we are speaking about the Republican Party organization, then I have had no involvement in the Republican Party organization. If we're talking about Republican Party values, that's been part of my life. The conservative values, I am a Republican, not only by birth in Christian County, but I am a Republican by choice. I believe in the values that are espoused by the Republican Party. So I definitely have sought to live out my life in conservative ways, both personally and organizationally, to use the principles that are, I think, good principles from the Republican Party in my life. And I will tell you, I think the best thing any of us can do for the Republican Party is to live and vote as Republicans.
The next question is again from the audience. What are your main reasons for running for commissioner without being negative? Name your positive points. Mr. Snowden?
My main reasons for running?
Yes, in a positive light.
Positive. I'm a pretty positive person. That's really not a problem for me. My exemplary work ethic, my attention to detail, my willingness to listen and discuss issues, how best way to solve problems. You know, the fact that I love this county. You know, it's amazing if you think about it that we've been the fastest growing county for 2 decades. And
When I got involved in the task force, it was the last thing on my mind running for county commissioner. But after getting involved and seeing what was going on, I was asked to run by a couple of people. And normally, when my head hits the pillow, I'm down for the count until the alarm goes off. I was awakened at 4:30 one morning, could not go back to sleep, tossed and turned, run for county commissioner, kept pounding in my head. I take my faith very seriously, just like these two gentlemen up here. We're all Christian people. That is one good thing. You're not gonna get a non-Christian regardless of who you vote for. But I prayed about it, I talked to my husband about it, and I decided that's what the Lord wanted me to do. So when you are called, or you feel that you are called to do something, you better do it. Whom shall I send? Send me. I think that I've got the strong work ethic and the values. I think my computer, and I'm done.
Next question. Last year at this time, the sheriff's office was in the hot seat with the former sheriff pleading guilty to embezzling county funds. Do you think the sheriff department is where it needs to be now? If not, explain. Mr. Bilyeu?
Yes, I'm very pleased with our current reality in the sheriff's department. Now, I would suspect that he would be the first to say that not all goals have been met that he has, but I am very pleased and proud of our men and women in uniform.
Mrs. Dollarhite?
The situation with the former Sheriff Kyle didn't happen overnight. And cleaning it up isn't going to happen overnight. I think the Sheriff's Department has worked very hard to try to overcome some really strong hurdles. Are they where they want to be? Probably not. A lot of that is probably due to the lack of funding. And as a county commission, we're going to have to work hard at trying to figure out how to bring them that funding. As I said before, unfortunately, it all comes down to money. And so one thing that we really need to look at is what programs can we utilize, what paperwork do we need to send in and when, so that we're not running behind and we're not having to borrow from the general revenue fund to cover those costs. I think we have a fine group of people that serve us. I feel safe in Christian County. I can't say that when I go other places, but I feel safe in Christian County, and I think that's a testament to our Sheriff's Department.
Mr. Snowden?
Question again, please.
Yes. What was one decision made? Oh, I'm sorry. Last year at this time, the sheriff's office was in the hot seat with the former sheriff pleading guilty to embezzling county funds. Do you think the sheriff department is where it needs to be now? If not, explain.
Well, I think our current sheriff came in at a very difficult time. I mean, you want to talk about pressure. I mean, everybody in the county was watching him when he came in. So do I think that the sheriff's department is where he needs to be now? Probably, I would say they probably overachieved from where probably any of us thought that they should be. Brad Cole's a personal friend of mine and known Brad for a long time. I know he's very dedicated. He's very trustworthy. He's a good, honest guy, and he works real hard. And I'm real proud of him. But I think our sheriff's department's done an excellent job.
Okay, this will be the last question before closing remarks. What was one decision made by the current county commission that you don't agree with? And what would you do differently if given the chance? Mrs. Dollarhite?
Well, I don't agree with buying the Mercy building. I feel like that's very little square footage for the expense. One thing that we were told with the task force is to follow the grand jury report. Nothing in that report stated that the building department or the juvenile office or the planning and zoning department needed more space and that they needed to move. The prosecutor's office, she is in extremely tight quarters. We have three junior prosecutors in one office. That is not effective. And she has utilized every inch of space. I'm not knocking Amy, but we need to work to find space for the prosecutor. And I can't imagine how she's going to function in the time to build this new building that they're looking at, which will be roughly $4.5 million. I don't see that we're going to solve a lot of the problems with that one building. And so I do disagree with that decision to buy the Mercy building.
Mr. Snowden?
Well, I just don't make a habit of rehashing decisions made by the commission. Number one, I don't think that there ever has been, nor will there ever be, a commissioner who makes 100% correct decisions. They've got a very difficult job. I'm sure no matter which one of us gets this position, there's going to be a certain percentage of people on every decision that's not going to agree with what we do. And we just have to hope that we don't I guess we would have to hope we don't aggravate the same people all the time. But, you know, it's kind of like when I played sports. It's real easy to sit on the sidelines and see all the calls that the officials miss. And that's the way I kind of look at deciding whether I think there's any, I mean, I'm sure there's plenty of things I might not necessarily agree with, but it doesn't do you any good. It's already been done.
Mr. Bilyeu?
I do not identify a particular decision that I would disagree with. In the times that I have been there, I've been very impressed with the conduct of the commission, each and every one of them. However, I do think that there have been instances, most notably on the receiving of bids, where things maybe were out of sequence, where we had people sitting out there having made bona fide bids at the request of the county, and there were still questions being raised about should we have ever bought this in the first place, should we sell it now? Not bad questions, just at the wrong time. So if I would say anything, it is take a longer look, and if you're going to bid something out, then decide well before you bid it out how far you're going to send the bid and to whom, and then when the bids come in, take the lowest bid if everything else is equal, and let those folks go on about their business.
Before closing remarks, each of you can have the opportunity to ask another candidate a question, beginning with Mr. Snowden.
I have.
Mr. Bilyeu?
I have none.
Ms. Dollarhite?
Where are we gonna go eat dinner when this is all over? Y'all cook dinner, how's that?
Okay, with closing remarks, we'll begin in reverse. So Mr. Snowden?
Well, as I said earlier, I currently hold a position with the Christian County Road Department. You know, I've really enjoyed working with the road department, and I've enjoyed getting the opportunity to meet with people and talk to people just about all kinds of different issues. You'll be surprised at, you know, what they'll talk to you about at times. You know, it can be anything from a tree limb hanging down, and, you know, you're running a road grader, but they want to talk about the tree limb hanging down or some other issue. But, you know, I'd like to commend these two people up here for the campaigns they've run. This is not easy. Anybody thinks it is, I've tried. It's very time consuming, it costs lots of money, and it's hard work. And they have done an excellent job, and I think the county will be very lucky, no matter which one of us three they get.
Mrs. Dollarhite?
I just want to thank everybody that has supported me. I have made more friends, I have had more positive comments from people, and I can't tell you what that means to me. I want to see our county thrive. I want to see it stay the close-knit community that it is, that I grew up in. I want to see my children be able to afford to live here and carry on the tradition. My mother's got a farm. She's up in years, and I would like to be able to take over that farm someday, but I hope that the taxes and that the regulations will not prohibit me from being able to do that. And I hope that we can make our county as growth-friendly and as family-friendly as we possibly can, because I can't think of any place else I would rather live. It's the only place I've known. I've been several other places, but this is home, and really nothing compares. And I'm just thankful for you all for coming. I know it's hot and taking out of your time. I appreciate you coming out and listening to the candidates, and my time's up. Thank you.
Mr. Bilyeu?
I would encourage you to look up here and see the three of us and ask these kinds of questions. Number one, who has the experience that is needed for this time? One of the things that's true is that the three of us have had exactly the same amount of experience in the last year. It's just doing different things. So if the experience that is needed is attending meetings, I am not your person for that. There's others here that have attended a lot more meetings. If your experience is in some other area, I might not. A second thing to look at is to look at the issue of whether or not they're a lifelong learner. Are they still showing signs that they're growing in their understanding of how life works and how organizations work? A third thing would be, look up here and say, who do you think will be the conflict diffuser and who would be a conflict escalator? We need to be able to diffuse conflict. And the final thing would be this, which is larger? Our windshield or our rear view mirror, looking forward or back.